ref. That's he got the ball. Fuck, I've done it again. Good evening, Tottenham fans, and welcome back to the Irish Hotspur with your boys, Dave, Jack, and we also have Soren and Ribsy here with us for the next couple of hours as we build up to Tottenham's Carabao Cup third round game against Doncaster under the lights at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium tonight. And who doesn't love a cup evening? Sometimes it's just a bit more relaxed, a bit more fun. But as always, being a Tottenham fan, there's always plenty to discuss. So as you see, we've got a great panel. And Thomas Frank also sort of, alluded to maybe putting out a strong lineup, but there will be some rotation. So we've got to navigate our way through that over the next couple of hours. I want to welcome a few people in at home as well. Big up, Lazy 8. Good to see you, Nico. How are you keeping, my man? Hopefully you're keeping well over there in New York, you and the family. We've also got Eddie tuning in from Australia. Good evening, Eddie. Hopefully you're keeping well, my man. We've got Slim Boy Tubbs in the house. Big up, Oxymoron. Hopefully you're keeping well. We've also got We Are Spurs TV. Says, let's go, Tottenham. Good to see you in the house. We also have AK Shags in the house. Great to see you, my man. We also have Mark New. Big up, Dave and Jack. Get in there, you Tottenham. The road to Wembley starts tonight. Come on, you Spurs. Well, that's true. You're absolutely spot on. We'll have a discussion around how far we think we're going to go. That's for sure. Big up, Jason Bell. Good to see you. Hopefully you're keeping well. My man, Matty Bynum. Good to see you. Big up, Dave and Jack. Let's put the game to bed by halftime and not overstretch any muscles. Come on, you Spurs. Well, that's the plan. But as we know, cup games don't usually go to plan for Tottenham Hotspur. There's usually some sort of chaos, controversy, or we just make hard work of it. Hopefully tonight is not one of them nights. Big up, Matty. Good to see you, lad. We also have Iceman in the house. Big up, Dave, Jack, Ribsy, and Soren. Also, everyone in the chat. Come on, you Spurs. And my man, Trinabad is here as well. Afternoon, gents. Comfortable test tonight. Come on, you Spurs. Great to see Spurs fans getting in here, guys. Go and make sure you get your drinks and partake in the discussion with us as we go along. All the questions and discussions that we're throwing out here tonight, make sure you give us your thoughts in the comment section below as we go along. We will try and bring up as many comments as we can. Look, we'll just kick it off straight into it, Jack. Spurs reached the semi-finals of the competition last season and will now begin the Carabao Cup journey under new head coach Thomas Frank. And Frank did come out in his pre-match press conference and said he wants to win it. Do you believe Tottenham, under his guidance, can go all the way in the Carabao Cup this season, Jack?
Hard to say with Thomas Frank. I think he probably could find a way to maybe in an ugly manner get as far as a semi-final. I think that's probably what we're going to hold him down to, is to at least get to something like a semi-final, especially if you get some favorable draws. If I remember the last League Cup, Dave, though, it did start off pretty sketchy, right? That was that game under Ange Postecoglou against Coventry City, right, where Jed Spence came off the bench and saved the day, and so did Brendan Johnson as well with a last-minute goal. So can't always write off these sort of teams like Doncaster Rovers, especially with them, who have weirdly been playing pretty well so far in the League One.
United in the last round, perfect example.
Yeah, so it's just they always could be banana peels, and I don't know. I don't have any expectations that we'll be smashing them 5-0, but it'd be great to get started off that way. But I have faith that Thomas Frank will be able to navigate his way to a semifinal. I'm not going to say, though, that we're going to be smashing every single team in the route to do so, especially when, which we'll be talking plenty about, a lot of rotation. And with a lot of rotation sometimes means, a little bit of, lackluster football at times.
Yeah, look, we've seen it in the past, when we've sort of changed up our 11s, Postecoglou suffered. He went out in his first season in the first round to Fulham, and I think Conte went out early in one of them as well. I think it was against Middlesbrough, if I'm correct.
That's right.
After making some rotational changes. So, the warning signs are there. This can be a very sort of tricky competition to navigate. And if you go into these games and take these fixtures for granted, it can very easily come back and bite you. So it'll be interesting to see how we get on, because I know Thomas Frank was reminded that I think at Brentford he went out to Gillingham and some other club, at the first time of asking as well. But saying that, I remember we beat him in the semi-final, I think, when we had Jose Mourinho in charge. So, it'll be interesting to see how Thomas Frank navigates this. And also, like you brought up, we will get on to rotation later on, but be interested to see where fans are, because we screen for rotation. But the likes of Jose and Conte and Postecoglou both got absolutely ridiculed, for making rotation when we end up being bounced out the cup. So it is a sort of tricky one to navigate, how many changes is enough and how many is too many. It's a very interesting conversation to have later down the line. But Soren, we'll bring you in I mean, is it realistic to expect Frank, or to think that Frank has an opportunity to win this competition? Do you think we have the squad depth to be able to navigate it alongside, the FA Cup, the Champions League, and the Premier League? Or do you think Thomas Frank is just sort of paying lip service to the fans while just trying to maybe install a winning mentality? And just give me 1 minute. My missus just after walking indoor from work. Just have to ask a quick question.
I've said it a few times now. I don't think this cup will be priority, but saying that, there obviously tonight's match is a priority because it's the next match to play. So the last time I saw Tottenham play Doncaster, we beat them quite convincingly, and I'm hoping for the same tonight. I think there will be some changes. There's got to be some changes in a sense, but I think it's a fine balance of how many. I don't want to see 10 changes, maybe 4, 5 maximum, and keep some sort of a spine or rigid kind of part to the team. But look, we know the Carabao Cup is kind of the shortest route to get to a final.
Yeah.
And if your draw is favourable, then what's to say we can't do it? But then, it'll be one of those. We'll play Doncaster tonight, hopefully get through. We'll probably get another good draw, and then another good draw, then another good draw, and then all the fans will be moaning we've played nobody to get to the final. We don't deserve to win. So who knows what's going to happen? But
it's one of those competitions though where people would usually ask to play nobody to the final, but maybe with the Europa League there was weirdly maybe a bit of a different narrative where we wanted for some reason to play.
Yeah, but who cares who you play on the way? It's all about who you play in the final and whether you win it or not. I mean, to me, if you get a good draw all the way through and you've kind of played nobody, you get to the final and win it. I'm not going to sit there and say, "Oh, but we played nobody." I'm going to sit there and say, "Well, we won it." And no matter how many times people say to me, "Well, we played nobody," I don't care. We won it. We won it. We won it. All those teams that played somebody didn't win it. So what difference did it make to them? But it's a cup competition. All fans want to win a cup at some point, and your big teams might not look favourably on this one, but to Tottenham fans, I'm sure it's a cup that we all want to win. And it doesn't matter whether it's the Carabao, doesn't matter whether it's the FA, doesn't matter whether it's Champions League. We want to win something. I do think this is the lowest priority on the list, but who cares if we win it? Doesn't matter where it came on the priority list if we actually win it.
I mean, Ten Hag had 2 cups that, if I remember correctly, the routes to the finals were relatively easy for him. Even what was it against Coventry City, right, in the semifinal that they just narrowly squeaked by to get to the FA Cup final, and then eventually had won it. So I think that's what we're praying for. Probably is just the easiest route to it. What about you, Ribsy? I mean, do you have any confidence in Spurs' ability and probably Thomas Frank's ability to navigate us that far?
We have a little bit of a history of managers coming in and overestimating the quality of the players, sort of, down the pecking order a little bit. The squad player issue at Tottenham has been an issue ongoing for the last decade or so. I remember Nuno, it wasn't in the Carabao Cup, but when Nuno came in and we had some qualifying match over in Portugal or something, and he played just a miss, like an absolute hodgepodge of a team. And I don't know what he was. I mean, obviously the return leg we played a decent team and we did fine from memory. But that match over in Portugal, I don't know what he was expecting out of the lower echelons of the Spurs team, but I think he got a bit of a shock at how quickly that quality dropped off. So hopefully Frank has had more time to sort of get a gauge on the quality of the team going down the pecking order, and he puts out a team that at least has a decent chance at getting us a decent, a win of some kind today, continuing us on in this competition. I don't think I'd be disappointed if we ended up going out of this competition. It's not like super high on my list of priorities, but of course you want to stay in every cup you can for as long as possible. But this is one of those trophies that is winnable, and it seems like we should be competing as strongly as we can, as long as it's not affecting the other competitions that we all consider higher priority at the moment.
I think that's a fair point, actually, that previous managers have been burned for having maybe too much faith in like you said, the fringe players to just come in. And like you said, they've just done some random mix of guys and just expected okay, we're going to this random Portuguese team that looks like a college stadium or something like that. It doesn't look like, you really need to think too much. And it's been something that every manager at Spurs has been burned for. But in the past, maybe the one thing that Thomas Frank, even though we criticized him for it after Brighton, the one thing he might be benefiting from is he's already made a lot of rotations. So it's not like most players aren't just coming into this game completely cold with no real football of any kind. They've all had opportunities here and there. So maybe you would hope that there's more of a semblance of, chemistry with each other. It's a fair point, though. Every other manager has been burned in the past.
Yeah, look, for me, are we still talking about, can Spurs win this, yeah?
Yeah, go ahead, Dave. Yeah. How far can Thomas Frank take him?
Yeah, look, for me, I think, with the right rotation in the right sort of games, I think there's no reason why we can't go and win this competition. We made the semi-final. Conte managed the semi-final while he was here. We made the final under Jose Mourinho. And we were in a semi-final last year. There's no reason with Thomas Frank's stability across the back line and that, if he gets the midfield right on the nights, there's no reason why we can't go all the way in this competition. And I think, if you're Thomas Frank, it's another opportunity for him to be able to get a trophy, and I for me, that's where I'm at. I want to continue on winning trophies after Europa League. I want to target trophies. I don't think we should go back to, I get that we have to give a bit of patience to Thomas Frank, but we shouldn't be sitting here and saying, well, there's no demands on him, there's no pressure on him and stuff like that, because I can tell you that people will be like that now. But if we end up going out tonight, people will turn on the guy. It happened under Postecoglou when he came in. He came into a big fanfare as soon as he lost to Fulham. Fans started turning on. When Conte went out of the cup, fans started turning on him. Tottenham fans do not like going out of the cups. There's an older generation out there like my father who have watched Tottenham pick up a couple of trophies every single year, and they would have been FA Cups, League Cups and stuff like that. So, with Tottenham fans, we sort of have what would you say, a love affair with these cups, and that's why we don't like going out of them. So I do think there is pressure on Frank, and I think if we could get to a semi-final,
the most realistic trophy, right? Technically,
yeah, of course it is. And if we can get to a semi-final, last year in probably one of our worst sort of domestic campaigns ever, there's no reason why we can't go and look to compete again. Down the years, in my lifetime, we've been close. We've been close. There's no reason why we can't get close again. And all you're asking for Thomas Frank is just to get us into a semi-final and give us a chance. That's all we're asking. You got an ideal draw tonight. Doncaster, a couple of leagues below. You got an ideal first round tonight to be able to get into the next round. Man United are already gone. Man City are making a load of changes tonight, sending out their kids. It'd be nice if they could go out early tonight as well. And then we'll take it from there. But I think this is an ideal opportunity for Thomas Frank, to sort of make his mark at Tottenham Hotspur. I think it'd be ideal if he could deliver this trophy, a bit like what Mikel Arteta done when he first arrived at Arsenal, delivered the FA Cup, and then all of a sudden he's been given all this time to sort of work with it, and now he has Arsenal up there competing every single year. Now they're never going to win anything under him, but at least he's got them back up there competing, and I think this would be ideal for Thomas Frank to try and get a bit of early success under the belt, which will then buy him time in the Tottenham dugout. At the end of the day, the reason why managers are getting sacked at Tottenham is because before Postecoglou, they weren't winning trophies, but also B, we weren't qualifying for the Champions League. So there is a lot of pressure on Thomas Frank to deliver. This sitting here sort of going, oh, well, he's got a couple of seasons. It just doesn't work like that in football, especially at Tottenham Hotspur. He is going to have to target some of these cups and try and go on a run. Anyway, that's how I feel about it. But look, we'll kick on, keep moving.
What we've got to remember, though, Dave, is, he can't come out and think we're playing a load of Hodge players. These, they're not a bad set of players. They're not farm labourers or out like that. So
but they're also not on like 40, 50 grand a week. Some of them fringe players that'll be playing tonight.
No, but what I'm saying is, you can't just go out and just play all the kids. It's got to be a pretty good balance of players. And I mean, whereas Ribsy sort of said, you know, it's not the worst thing if we go out. It is tonight. We can't go out tonight against Doncaster. You know, if we're going to go out, which I think is probably what he meant, that it's not a bad thing to go out, say, against the City of Liverpool or another Premiership team, but we can't go out tonight.
Mm. No, we can't. We can't. Look, I think Frank will lose some buy-in because, you know, we've got a couple of nice, easy fixtures coming up now over the next 4. We've got Doncaster tonight, Wolves at the weekend, although I'm not taking that for granted. They always beat us. You know, then we've got Bodo, Glimt, and then you've got Leeds. After that, then you're going into the tricky ones, Aston Villa, Everton's, Chelsea's, things like that. And then all of a sudden, if he goes out the cup tonight and, you know, the team drop a bit of confidence and he doesn't get that forward line clicking going into these bigger games, tougher tests, all of a sudden the pressure will start mounting on the guy very, very quickly. It can come out of nowhere sometimes. So for me, he has to get through tonight, you know, and sort of keep that vibe of the cup going, because ultimately that's what kept Postecoglou in the job all the way to the Europa League final, and for him to be able to win it because he kept us in the cup competitions. So I do think, you know, keeping us in the cup competitions will do Frank the world of good. But guys, Doncaster are flying high in League One, you know, to Soren's point, you know, and that's after promotion from League Two last year. So they are a team that are incredibly confident at the minute. Their manager did come out and say that they were going to come here and have a go. And they've got absolutely nothing to lose. They would probably fancy a cup upset here, you know, given Spurs' history of slipping up in these types of games in years gone by. So how do we make sure we don't become the headline for all the wrong reasons tonight, like Man United did a couple of weeks ago?
They do usually come out, these sides, especially when they're at home. So maybe we're benefiting from the fact that we're not at home, or that we are at home for this game, because these sides do tend to come out very intense and very quickly to look to try to score in the first opening minutes. And usually the team that is kind of just expecting to win inevitably does end up getting caught and does get punched in the mouth kind of early. That happened with Man United. Like, Grimsby Town scored some amazing goals really in the opening minutes there and just were all over them and looked like the Premier League side, whereas Man United definitely did not. So I think it's important that it's not like we have to score early. It'd be great if we did, but I think we have to be careful of, you know, not just kind of rolling into the game with sort of a lax attitude, especially the players, and, you know, just expecting to get over the line. You know, I think that's when it starts to spell a bit of trouble. And, you know, given my nerdiness, sometimes I do listen to this podcast just to get an idea of who is doing well. I listen to this podcast called The Not Top 20, and it does, you know, talk about how League One and League Two are usually the more difficult leagues to kind of get out of and navigate because they're less predictable than the Championship. They're saying the Championship now is a bit like the Premier League. It's pretty predictable who will go up, who will stay down. Whereas the fact that Doncaster are doing so well, they're saying they're kind of a team. They mentioned them like a few weeks ago. They're a team that's actually surprised some people in doing so well in League One. They might not really be that bad of a side, you know, despite being in League One. They could catch us out. So yeah, just don't underestimate. That's for sure.
For sure. Look, I think the opening 15 minutes from Tottenham Hotspur is so crucial tonight. You know, I think what we need to do is try and pin them back, put the pressure on, and, you know, very quickly, subconsciously, all of a sudden, then they start going, oh my God, this is going to be a long evening. If this is the relentlessness, it's coming. If we sort of start slow, make a couple of errors, all of a sudden, you're just giving them confidence, you're allowing them to grow into the game. And that's where the sort of problems start arising for Tottenham, because then all of a sudden heads stop dropping. For me, like in years gone by, we shouldn't have had some of the cup upsets we've had. At the end of the day, we've had much better quality out on the pitch than the opposition that we faced, like the likes of Coventry, Colchester, Middlesbrough, teams like that. How much of it is actually down to attitude and intensity from Spurs tonight? Because I feel like in years gone by, players have sort of gone out and just sauntered about going, eventually our quality will shine through and eventually we'll get over the line, and they've ended up being caught. To me, tonight, it's like, you know, my biggest bugbear at Tottenham in years gone by is that, you know, there's opportunities, there's minutes here for players tonight, you know, and it's up to them to take them on the football pitch. In years gone by, players have lost games like this. Not all of a sudden throwing the toys out of the pram because the manager's not selecting them. And then all of a sudden they're trying to get the manager sacked and they're trying to throw him under the bus. So how much is it attitude and intensity important in tonight's performance, boys?
I mean, here's one for We Are Spurs TV. This is a team of Hodge players, and when they come out tonight, they are going to be up for it. This is their cup final, and all they want to do tonight is come to our ground and kick our asses. And they will put everything into it. They will not leave anything on that pitch other than sweat, tears, and blood. And it's never easy playing these teams, because as much as we say, you know, players should be motivated when you play for top end, it's harder to motivate because you kind of think you should almost be winning these without even turning up. And that is the problem we've seen in the past. We don't turn up. We don't turn up for these
The
games.
motivation
And
for some of them guys, though, should be, if I perform tonight, it means then I will get minutes off the bench somewhere along the line in a meaningful game. You know, instead of sitting there going, well, he won't pick me. Of course he's not going to pick you if you can't run against
the problem with that, Dave, is we've seen in the past where players have had a good game and then still not got picked. So, I mean, look, it's hopefully it's different under Frank. If somebody comes out tonight, say a Matthias Tell or an Archie Gray or somebody like that comes out and they absolutely boss it. But the thing is, they're not going to get in front of those players that are in front of them. They might be given a look in, but you know, when you've got players that are levels above what they are, I mean, they would have to come out tonight and put an absolute stellar performance in, absolute stellar, to even shift any of those. And we know a lot of the players who played tonight probably won't play at the weekend. So, you know, the youngsters won't play again 2 games in a row. So, but tonight's the night, you know, if they come out and they put the performance in tonight, then they might get the next Carabao Cup. That's the way, you know, that's what they've got to think of. But it's like we say, how many times have we seen it where we saw it last year with Postecoglou, with, like you say, under Conte, and you think, yeah, it's a weakened team from us, but it's still strong enough. And the players haven't even turned up. They've absolutely got bossed off the field. And this is something tonight, like you say, that we've kind of got to come out and we've got to show Doncaster that we're not messing tonight. You know, it's going to be a long night for you, like you say. You've come to London, you're going to get absolutely battered, and you're going to go home as miserable as F, and, you know, it's a long journey home for you.
Look, for me, like, I don't, but like, I get what you're saying, that, you know, sometimes off the back of these games, maybe some players haven't earned minutes. That's under previous regimes. I get it. You know, maybe Conte and Jose were more stuck in sort of their way of thinking. But to be fair, they were often proven right, you know, that when these guys often stepped in, they lost those games. So they were often proven right by sticking to sort of a first 11, if you would like. But, you know, like, I think this Tottenham squad is a little bit different, though. You've got some younger players that are sort of hunting down for minutes. And for me, you know, one thing that I always take, you know, off Roy Keane is how much he recognizes the squad players, some of the younger members of that Man United squad, that when them guys needed a rest, that they came in, they stepped in, gave it the all, and they managed to win games, which then come the end of the season meant they were in the hunt for nearly every single trophy. And the gratitude that he shows to players like that, for me, you know, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for some of the younger members of the squad to go out there and try and take their opportunities, because Thomas Frank will give them opportunities moving forward. He gave Wilson Odegaard an opportunity the other day because he trained well. You know, he spoke in the pre-match press conference that if there's an opportunity tonight, he might give some of the youngsters that he's going to bring on the bench tonight a debut or two here or there if the opportunity arises and stuff like that. So Thomas Frank is willing to give them the opportunities. And at the end of the day, especially for some of these frontline players, that left-hand side is still wide open for anyone who wants it. Thomas Frank is just someone waiting for someone to stick their hand up and say, I'll have it, you know, and go out there and perform. So I think there's a golden opportunity for Johnson, Matisse Tell, you know, Wilson Odegaard. If any of them get out on the pitch tonight, which I'm hoping that will be the front three tonight, there's a huge opportunity for them to sort of try and nail down that left wing spot, because they'll probably get rewarded then on the weekend. And then if they can take it on the weekend, then it's theirs to lose at the end of the day. So for me, you know, I'll be licking my lips going into these games. And that's why I sort of question sometimes the attitude of some of our players that go into this game. If they, like, some of them think they're too good for these sort of games. And it's like, I mean, there's a reason why you're on the fringe of the squad. And the only way of getting back in is by performing in these games and avoiding cup upsets. Because if you lose tonight, Thomas Frank will find it very hard to turn around to a lot of these players in a time of need to try and depend on these guys.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a massive opportunity for them tonight to gain the manager's trust moving forward. Ribsy, you anything you want to add to the conversation there before we move on?
No, I mean only that I just want to see a professional performance from whomever they put out. It would be lovely as I think it was Soren was earlier saying it'd be lovely to see the team just go out and absolutely just batter the hell out of them, and we'll win 4-0 or 5-0 or something, which is certainly possible. I mean the golf inequality that there should be between Tottenham Hotspur and Doncaster Rovers. I mean that's not an unreasonable scoreline to happen in this sort of match, but we know from experience that isn't what happens. So what I want to see is a professional performance, and as you say, I want the players that do get selected to go out into this match to go in and play it as if this is an opportunity to get minutes. This is an opportunity to impress, and this is an opportunity to play in the first team and to show what they can do. So whether that's youngsters or fringe players or squad players or even if it's a starter and they're playing today, they still got to put in a proper performance and not just just phone it in like we've seen so many times before with this sort of matchup. Usually it's when we're away. I think we usually do a better job. At least we just sort of will at least limp it over the line when we're playing at home in these sorts of matches. But it's just, I think it's important that they go out there with a firm sort of battle plan to perform, and just get the job done, not try and do too much too early, maybe.
No, 100%. 100%. And look, for me tonight also, I think it's an opportunity for a lot of these players to show that they're hungry for more success off the back of the Europa League. They all know how great it felt to lift it. I know how great it felt. I was there at the parade and everything. As to see the adulation they got, I'm sure they're going to want more days like that in the future. And I think maybe the difference this time around compared to seasons gone by is we do got a lot more young, hungrier players. In times gone by, we were sort of using your Sanchez's and players like that who didn't really want to be out there in them games, to be quite honest with you. They thought they were too good for them minutes and probably were going into them games actually with a lot of fear, maybe already thinking or worried about a cup upset. Whereas I'm hoping this time around, I think Frank will put some experience out there, but I'm hoping this time around, the fact that we've got a lot of young, hungry, sort of energetic players, will sort of, with a point to prove, I'm hoping we'll work out in our favor. And hopefully, I'm hoping that we'll see some sort of good performance tonight and a couple of goals, because in years gone by, that's what I used to turn up and see in these games. So I don't know why that's changed somewhere along the line. There's no reason why we can't, go out and put 3 or 4 by these. This is a massive stadium. They're not used to playing in stadiums of this size. If we just, stretch the pitch, get our wingers and fullbacks to hug the touchline, dominate possession, just look to play forward, put the pressure on them, test the goalkeeper early on. I think they're there for the taking. I really do. I'm not really scared of Doncaster Rovers. I am well aware that if we are 5 or 10%, off it, or maybe going into it slightly worried of a cup upset, then they can very easily happen. But this is an easy game tonight to stretch the pitch and be brave in possession. What we don't want to do is just our centre-backs having fucking more touches than anybody else on the football. Our midfielders just rotating it across their 2 banks of 4. We want to see players be brave tonight, get on the ball, run at them, isolate players, take them on, throw balls into the box, have shots, put them under severe pressure, because once you start doing that, eventually the dam will crack. But look, Thomas Frank did say, guys, he made it very clear that there will be some rotation. But he said it. He sort of emphasized off the back of it, it's still going to be a strong side. So what does that sort of perfect balance look like to the panel here tonight?
I think you've got to look at it, and to me, if obviously the 11 players, we've got to see at least 5 to 6 of what we would consider first team starters. And probably a 50-50, but I'm kind of, the way I look at it is, I either want to see our normal back 4 or back 5 and change up front, or the normal starting front and change at the back. I mean, the thing is, I suppose if we bring Danso in, we're not really weakening it that much, are we? He's capable of starting for the team. He's a good defender,
he's proved he's been reliable.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could probably maybe drop Danso and leave drop Romero and put Danso and Van der Ven, or you bring Danso with Romero, but try and keep one of those defenders in. Obviously, I'm kind of expecting Jed Spence probably on the left with Porro on the right, and then it's whether you change Kinski on for Vicario. I think I'd rather still see Vicario in there just to keep that consistency going. And then, your changes in midfield is probably something like an Archie Gray for Paulina. Probably keeping Papsar in there because, he should be able to run tonight still. Probably won't see Simmons, I don't think. And well, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those. I'd like to see Simmons, and I'd like to see him play that number 10 and be given that, that leadership type role to go run the midfield. But I also kind of think he might be one that is dropped to bring in somebody just to sort of give them the game. But if you bring Simmons in, then we probably see maybe Kudos dropped to give him a bit of a rest, and put Brennan Johnson on the right, and probably maybe Tell on the left and Richie up front, just to keep again another player up front, or you put Tell in the middle and bring let Odebear have another game. But I think I've heard Mwani's injured again, isn't he? Or injured.
Mwani's out, Davies is out.
Yeah.
Thank God, that's a blessing in disguise, that one.
I presume Solanke's not back yet, is he? So
No.
So to me, it's probably going to be Mateus Tell up front. So you've got to have a nice little mix of players in there that have been playing, plus a couple to chuck in there. But I don't want to see 10, 11, or 7, 8, 9 changes. Because, like we've said before, if it doesn't work, there is going to be a meltdown. There will be a meltdown.
For me, I'll be honest, I'm okay with making rotational changes. I mean, look, I think it's one of them. We're so scared of a cup upset. Look, we have paid the price in years gone by that. We're so scared of going, we want to, we shouldn't be making rotations. But, fans were arguing Postecoglou didn't make rotations last year. Fans have been calling for rotations in plenty of games this season. And then when a cup game comes around against a League One side and it's your best opportunity to be able to rotate, people are very hesitant to rotate. I don't quite understand it. People were more okay to rotate against Brighton on the weekend and felt more comfortable doing it then than what they are tonight. I just don't understand it. But look, Jack, in fairness, past managers have been criticised for going too weak and they end up paying the price like we spoke about. How does Frank sort of avoid that same mistake then? Because he's another one who also speaks a lot about rotation. But again, it seems like he's maybe a bit hesitant heading into this game to rotate. I don't understand, Jack. Make sense of it.
I think there are a few things that could be said on that. I think Frank, like I brought up earlier, has benefited from not just rolling out the same team week in, week out. So whoever he does pick tonight, the majority of those players have already been given minutes and opportunities. They're not just going into a completely cold, which I think can lead to a cup exit. The other thing, though, to say is Frank is going to benefit from the fact that he doesn't have, in my opinion, of course, people can feel differently, but he doesn't have the complete dross of the Matt Doherty's, Aurier's, Sanchez's, Dyer, Davies combinations of the past, right? Or what we had of various players like Sessegnon and whatnot that just weren't good enough and then were on the fringe of the squad or just were barely putting in good enough performances. So it just felt like there was just such a huge drop off if you did go to the fringe players, because the starting players alone weren't even that great, that the previous managers had to pick. So I would say that Frank has a slightly better squad to pick from with the guys that aren't even playing as much. The other thing, though, is maybe he is kind of benefiting. This is a weird thing to say, but maybe he is benefiting from some of the injuries in this case. If you were someone that didn't want too much rotation for this game, because Solanke being out, Mwani being out, Davis being out, Takai still being out, those are all different options for him to pick, but they're not available. So it's not like there's going to be that much rotation to players that haven't really played it all, really. I think the starting 11 that we see tonight will be a lot of familiar players that have already been given minutes so far this season. So I think he benefits maybe in a weird way from those injuries. Like he has to pick guys that already have played a few minutes here and there.
I think
Slight fear, though, is I feel like you should give rest to some guys that we know are absolutely crucial to the season, like
we're going to get
Kudus,
on to that.
for example. Yeah, sorry, I'm going to add.
No, we're going to get on to that. I think you do make a great point there, though, actually, Jack, to be fair to you, in terms of, Johnson, if he comes in tonight, it's not like he's coming in cold, right? He's had a couple of appearances off the bench. He started. Udebur started at the weekend. So if he starts tonight, he's not coming in cold. Tell has appeared at times, so he's not coming in cold. Even if he makes changes, Archie Gray played against Burnley, got a couple of minutes off the bench there recently. So again, he's sort of coming in with a bit of football in his legs. So I would actually argue, I think he can make a lot of changes, but a lot of these players that are coming in have already sort of been integrated in the squad one way or another. So, he can make a lot of changes without it really maybe having the bite back that it has in seasons gone by. I think you make an absolutely great point there. But look, I suppose that just brings us naturally on to the next question then, and we'll let yourself and Ribsy go on this one as well. Is there anyone you think that needs a rest more than others tonight, or maybe a player who needs this game more than others just to sort of get their confidence back?
I think Kudus has probably earned himself a little rest. We surely don't need.
We need him tonight
for this.
Exactly.
Swear. Yeah. God, what was it? In that season, the COVID season, when Jose was manager, and I think we were playing away at Wickham, and we had one of those teams put out that was just a complete rotational team, and I remember it just being an absolute miserable match. And then eventually they put on Gareth Bale and someone else, and they it was probably Harry Kane at the time.
And Ndombele scored in that game, didn't he, Wickham?
Was it Ndombele? Anyway, but it's one of those situations where if we're in that situation, I'm right there with you. I'm going to be very frustrated if we need to put on those sorts of players in order to win this sort of match. That said, I think we've got more than enough quality to be able to win this with a rotated squad. I know I sounded a little bit doom and gloom earlier. It's just a little bit gun shy from previous performances in similar matches. But it's you would think that you would be able to just have Porro completely rested today, play Spence on the right hand side, which I'm sure he'd appreciate being able to play on his preferred side, even though he's been playing very well on the left, in my opinion. Not perfect, but been playing well. Udogi's looking stronger and stronger and played quite well in the last match, so I'm happy to see him on the left. But yeah, the Kudus and Porro would be the two that I'd say you could rest easily.
I mean, Bribsy's right. I just looked up that game. Wickham scored first under Gareth Ainsworth, the, of course, infamous manager. And
the rock and roll manager.
And Gareth Bale scored or something like right before halftime, but then we had to sub on Harry Kane, Sonny, and Højbjerg and Tanguy in order to kind of see the game out. So it is, something that has happened to Spurs in the past when you make that much rotation. I just think the squad is better, though. So I think there's actually, in a weird way, fewer excuses for Thomas Frank. Like the squad is technically better, in my opinion.
I think he's got one of the best squads available to him, and then maybe what Jose had, a Conte had, a Nuno had, and maybe a Postecoglou had. I think he's got a better squad. The signings that we made this summer have brought in real strength, to our team, which means players that other managers have had to rely on are more sort of in a backup role. So I think, he's definitely got a stronger squad. But Jack, also, any other players, bar Kudus, you think really could do with a rest tonight? And, is there any players that you think could really do with this game tonight to sort of build their confidence?
We can't sadly rest Van de Ven and Romero, even though I'd probably like to. I think we probably should rest Van de Ven, to be honest, because I think someone like Romero could be pretty useful. Romero's the captain, so that's maybe sometimes part of being the captain. You do have to play in these type of games to just be that leader, that example on the pitch. But then it's going to be a game that you would think in possession, Spurs could use Romero more than Van de Ven.
Yeah.
I'd hope that we don't need to use Van de Ven's recovery speed to bail us out or anything like that in a game like this. I think it would be nice just to have someone like Romero who can pick out passes, sort of keep the ball moving, be able to, break the lines of, you would imagine, a defensive setup from Doncaster, but Romero's that guy who can sort of unlock them a bit, building out from the back. So Romero will have to play. Van de Ven should be rested. I would think that Porro as well, like Ribsy mentioned, I'd like to see Porro given rest. Like so far, Porro seems like he's lined up for another 3,000, 4,000 minute season. And it would be nice if we could give him a rest there. And then Kudus. And apart from that, like I wouldn't say anyone else has really been that overly expended. You know, it's just been Kudus, Pedro Porro, and to a degree Van de Ven and Romero. But one of them is going to have to play tonight.
No, 100%. I think you're spot on. Like, I think, Davies is out injured. Takai only really returned to training Monday. This game might be too soon for him. So I think across the back line, I think we've got no option but to actually play a strong back line. Of course, Kinski's going to be in goals. We'll have a bit of a conversation about him later on.
Dragishin wasn't mentioned, though, in the press conference, right? So I'm assuming that Dragishin is just still, like, getting back to...
He's nowhere near it yet. But like the way I'd be looking at it tonight, if I was Thomas Frank, is what players do I really depend on that I'm going to need in the trenches come November, December time, January time, when the fixtures are coming in thick and fast, and I need to rely on them, for a lot of the games. They're the players I'd be looking at, taking out tonight, resting, maybe a Paulinia, a Bentancur, a Kudus. They're the sort of players that I'd be looking at that we will be relying heavily on when the games start coming in thick and fast, in about a month or two's time. So that's the way I'd be looking at it tonight. I do have a couple of comments started. I am going to come back to them, but I just want to throw another question at Soren there. I mean, Soren, which young or sort of fringe players are you most excited to see tonight versus Doncaster? And who do you think will sort of shine tonight and break through, make Frank regret not including them more often, maybe? Don't say Johnson.
I think it's hard to say because it depends how risky he wants to get. I mean, I really want to see Archie Gray play that number 6. And I know he's maybe not the type of player that you're meaning in this, but he's the sort of player, the ones that are not getting a lot of minutes that played plenty last year, and put him in the position he's meant to be in. And again, players like Matthias Tell, he's getting a lot of flack, but this again might be the type of game that does him some good where, look, I mean, he could shine tonight and that might be the level he's at. This could be his level. So if he can't play tonight, then he's not going to do very good. And again, I know it's kind of not the answer you're probably looking for, but Simmons, if he does play, I really want to see how good he is against this kind of opposition. Players that are going to come and try and kick him. This could be the perfect game for his trickery, his ball skills, his quick feet, that sort of thing. But going to the opposite end, and I know again it's not really answering your question, and I apologise, but this could be a perfect game for Richie up front. If he got a couple of goals, his confidence could, doesn't matter who you score against. If you're scoring goals, it's the perfect thing. But I think it's one of those, where we say, let's make changes. And I think yourselves and Ribsy sort of said it, that these players have all played a little bit through the season anyway. So it's not like making wholesale changes. But I think you've just got to keep that continuity there, that those players that have played a few minutes, that have played a lot of games for us, carry on playing, but it's just got to be a fine mix. And
I actually think this one's easy for Frank though, Soren. I think when you look at it, right, obviously Kinski's coming in tonight, but he's no option but to play a strong backline tonight. One of Romero or Van de Ven has to play alongside Danzo. We spoke about earlier, and you praised him earlier. Danzo is reliable. When he steps in, no one fears, or worries that he's going to make stupid mistakes. Then you either have to play Porro, Spence, or Adobe. So, the base, your back line is going to be a very strong back line. It's going to be more or less a starting 11 back line. So he actually has the fortune to put that out there tonight and keep things secure across the back line. And then he has the options then to be able to make a couple of rotations in midfield and up front, ahead of him. And if that doesn't go right, at least we've got the back line there to sort of keep them out. And then he can just bring off some of the better players off the bench if that's what he wants to do. And then go win the game later on. So I actually think his job is made easy tonight, because in years gone by, it's been the likes of Sanchez, Davies, Dyers, Dragusins, who have made shocking mistakes in games like this that have come back to bite us.
The thing is, I think Wayne's just put in, is Dragusin back tonight?
No, I've seen.
Well, he wasn't mentioned at all in the press conference, but he has been.
I'm just looking at Wayne's.
For a while.
Yeah, just looking at Wayne's predicted, like, what he'd like to see, sort of thing. And he's put I just wondered if I kind of thought if Dragason's back, we could see a back line of Dragason and Danzo. That was all. But
he doesn't give away a lot, Frank, when he's asked about injuries. He almost just mentions a few players, and then people have to press him further. And then he goes like, "Oh yeah, that's right. Also, this guy isn't actually available. My bad." He kind of does.
Yeah,
whereas Ange in the past,
what he did actually say in the pre-match press conference was, that everyone that was injured for the Brighton game is still not available for this game.
Yeah, that's kind of what I heard.
That's telling you that Radu Dragusin is out for tonight's game. I think there would have been a mention.
That's kind of what I thought, but I just saw that and I thought, oh, is maybe I'd not heard. But yeah, I just think it's one of those. Look, we keep going and saying it. We can't take the game too lightly because we know how often there has been upsets. We go to a team like Doncaster or to Sheffield or Grimsby in the past, and we've come away with a loss. So to me, it's as much as you want to see rotation, it can't be a lot of rotation for me. We've got to keep that. It's got to be a strong team that is just going to be fluid in the way we've been playing and go and get the job done. Look, for argument's sake, we could be 2 or 3, well, hopefully 3-0 up, say, by half time, then change it again. That's the way I look at it. That, I get put the weaker team in and bring on the strong ones, but I would rather see it the opposite way, where you put the strong team in and then change it for the second half if we're doing well. Because, look, if the first team aren't winning by half time, then you kind of look at it and think, how would our second string have been doing by now? So
the problem
I'd rather see a strong start.
The problem I have with, starting a strong lineup tonight is they're going to be absolutely bollocks by Christmas if that's the case. These are the sort of games. If you're looking at the fixtures we've got coming up, Champions League, Premier League teams, this is the game where he has to make his rotational changes. This is 90 minutes. He can't save out of these players' legs where, touch wood, it shouldn't come back to bite you. There's more risk of it coming back to haunt you, if you make the wrong rotations in a Premier League game or a Champions League game. And they're games of bigger magnitude and stuff like that. And fans will not tolerate it. And it's why I'm a bit confused heading into this game, because in general, fans have been screaming for rotation I've heard rotation for the last 12 months at this football club from the fan base. Then when it comes to a game like tonight, all of a sudden everyone's afraid to make rotational changes. And it's like, but this is the least consequential game to be able to do it.
But Dave, you say that, and I'm not saying you in particular, but all those that are shouting for 7, 8, 9 changes will be the first ones to complain if we go out tonight.
Yeah, but I wouldn't complain at Thomas Frank. I'd go after these players like I always have done in games like this. Yeah, but there's no reasons why these players should be losing games like this, even if he makes 11 changes tonight. There's no reason. They all train together week in, week out. And they would have had a couple of days on the training pitch together, as a starting 11 heading into this game anyway. So there's no reason why they can't get out there and go and beat these games. In years gone by, it's just been down to intensity and hunger for these sort of games. But at the end of the day, if they lose to Doncaster tonight, and fans have been screaming for rotation, nobody should be going after Thomas Frank. You should be going after the individuals responsible for the embarrassment of losing to Doncaster Rovers.
We say that, and I mean, we've already kind of argued against our own points by saying so far through the season we've been rotating players all the time. So in that sense, it's not a big as thing tonight to suddenly rotate the whole team, because over the last 4 or 5 matches we have been rotating players. So to put, it's not like under last year where we were under Postecoglou and we were playing the same 11 game in, game out, gaming. You look back over the last 5 matches, 6 matches, and there has been rotation in every single game. So it's not the same. But look, we say, well, it won't be on Thomas Frank. Well, if you kind of look at it as a counter argument, when Postecoglou made those changes last year against Fulham, it was still, the year before, probably won it. It was still a strong enough team to probably go out and compete against Fulham. But a lot of us, and I mean, I was one of them, didn't like what he did because he made too many changes. And I'm just fearful tonight that these are the type of games that we do or can slip up against, because them players from Doncaster, look, on paper, we should be going out and thrashing them. But in reality, we know tonight could either be an absolute balls up, or we will look good. But the chances are it could be a balls up, because we that's the way football works. And
I get it. But I would seriously question the players' motivation and hunger and desire. With the wages that they're being paid, and they'll be the first ones crying to a manager to want to play against an Arsenal, a Chelsea, Man United, the glamour fixtures, the Champions League games when they all come around. They'll be the first one banging on his door. They'll be the first one, looking to start a mutiny and get him out of the football club when things aren't going their way. If we don't get over the line tonight, and if Frank does make changes and we don't get over the line, the only people that should be criticised is the 11 players that were probably begging for minutes in a game like tonight. We should be questioning their appetite, their desire, and if they're good enough for Tottenham. At the end of the day, a lot of the players that suffered defeats to sort of these teams in years gone by, they're very quickly gotten rid of. They're very quickly bounced out of the club. It was proven that they weren't good enough to be here. So the same applies tonight. If they can't get over a tie like this, then they don't deserve to be here. They're not good enough.
But it's like I say, I mean, I'm not arguing against not making any rotation, because I think, like I've said, 4/5 players should be rotated to start with. And then if you win in the game, you bring on some more. But I just think with the way we have rotated through the games already, it's not the same issue as having to make a whole scene change because our players are knackered. And look, we've only played 5 games. And I get the argument that, we're talking about maybe Christmas and beyond where the players are tired. But if Frank's going to be happy enough to change and rotate 1 or 2 players every single game, which he seems to be able to do, then tonight's game, yes, bring on some kids. And I'm not saying don't bring on some kids, but don't change the whole team is my argument. Because, look, the most important thing tonight is actually winning the game. It's getting through to the next round, because if we don't win tonight, we're not in the draw. And that, to me, is the most important thing. That, yes, rotate some players, but make sure it is not a team that might beat Doncaster. It's a team that will beat Doncaster.
Yeah, fair. No, fair. I understand. I understand the point. Anyway, look, we'll keep the show moving. We got James Coffey says the issue with these games in the past is that they lack a creative player, so the team doesn't work no matter what talent is on the pitch. Look, I agree with that for sure, but I'd also add that you've got players across the back line who were putting passes into the stands and stuff like that, which also didn't help in terms of confidence when you're 5 minutes into a game and they're rattled beyond belief. That doesn't help. You got players out there who aren't trying a leg, not running around, think they're too good to be there, overpaid superstars. That doesn't help. But in general, I do agree with what you're saying in terms of that sort of creative player out there to, pick out the 4 players, create a consistent amount of chances, keep the pressure on. I do understand what you're saying in that regard. That is a fair point to make, because often, you would rest the likes of a Maddison or a Christian Eriksen in years gone by for these sort of games. You didn't really have a backup, in that position. But I'd argue you do. Simmons didn't start the weekend. There's no reason why he can't come in here and at least play 60 minutes tonight. I think, it'd be an ideal opportunity, 11 men behind the ball probably tonight. Let's see what he can offer in that regard. I think there's an opportunity. Bergvall might even start again tonight, an opportunity for him to show what he can do in that aspect. Wilson Udeberg and Matisse Teller, French under 21 internationals. There should be more than enough sort of creativity in this side in general to sort of beat Doncaster. If we don't, then we're going to have to look for another 500 million to spend across this front line yet again, then, to be quite frank with you. But, Jack, do you agree with James here? I think he does make a great point. That player that can get on the ball and dictate the tempo, the attacking play and attacking game for Tottenham.
He's right in the sense that if you really are pinning the team back and you do have a lot of control of the game, you're just camped in their half, you're just putting a lot of pressure on them. Just having that player with that bit of extra more quality to be able to pick out a pass, take it past a player, maybe have a shot on goal, test the goalkeeper if the goalkeeper is good enough. Someone like a Xavi Simmons, Kulusevski, Madison's, these type of guys probably just makes it even harder for these teams like Doncaster Rovers. But I also agree with you, Dave. Like, if I'm even looking back at the lineup versus Coventry City, the game that we nearly lost under Ange, Bergvall was in the midfield. Bentancur was in the midfield. Pop Matasar was in the midfield. So you kind of think like that should have been enough, like, to be able to create, some opportunities. But if I remember that game correctly, like we were getting carved open by Coventry. Jet Spence saved us, and like you were saying, that was a game where everyone was just passing it out of play. No one could complete more than 3-4 passes, together in that. So you could argue there were supposed to have been enough creative guys with some capacity on the pitch. But he is right, James, in the sense that if you are playing well, just having someone like a Xavi Simons in the team would make life even harder for a Doncaster Rovers to try to do something.
For me, I think these games, are sort of easy to manage. If you've got a squad and a bunch of players that all have a common goal of trying to win trophies, which I'm hoping we do, that's why we're going to get onto it, but I sort of agree that I think Romero has to play ahead of Van de Ven tonight, just purely because the guy is motivated by silverware, and that will rub off on players out there tonight. He'll be all over their ass if they make a mistake tonight. He'll be sitting there going, guys, it's a cup game. I'm motivated by silverware, so, get your ass in gear. So that's one reason why I'll be playing him tonight. But if you've got a squad that share a common goal, that the aim is to be successful, then they should be, you should be able to rely on players to come in here tonight and, do a job, win the game and get into the next round and sort of just keep it ticking over. If you've got a fractured squad where you've got some players that want to win and others who don't really care, that's where you get slip-ups against your Middlesbroughs and teams like that in years gone by, when you've got a bit of a fractured squad. Now, it looks on the periphery, it's a very sort of together squad right now. Frank, the coaching staff, the players, they're all pulling in one direction. They do seem to be motivated. Frank is talking about winning trophies, which I absolutely love. He's not skirting around the issue. He's putting that pressure on himself. There's plenty of fans out there who keep taking that pressure off him. I love the fact that he goes, you're all wrong. I'll just put it on myself if you don't believe me. I'm at Tottenham Hotspur. I need to win trophies. So that's good. I mean, that's a positive sign. But at the end of the day, you're only really going to know their true intentions when they're on the football pitch tonight. Are you going to get players that if he gives an opportunity tonight, that sulk, that they're not in the first 11, that they're put out there on a cold Wednesday evening like tonight? Are they going to sulk about it tonight? Not try a leg, not run around? That's where some issues come in. But it looks like everyone's together. And with Romero's captain, you're hoping, he's instilled a winning belief into everybody and a winning mentality. And we make this game look easy tonight. But big up, James. Really appreciate the support, my man, and the talking point. Big yourself up, Mr. Coffee. That is US dollars, I'm assuming. So let me know whereabouts in the US you're from, Jamesy boy. I'm going to take a few listeners' comments here as well, and then we're going to crack on. We're going to have a little conversation around Demola Jai, and then we're going to get into individuals tonight. We have AK Shake says, Paulo and Kudos have to sit today. Also think Richie needs to be put on ice given our injuries in the number 9, which I think is an absolute valid point. That's probably the main reason why I wouldn't sort of start him tonight anyway. We also have Eye on the Storm that's approaching. It's a perfect moment for rotation and resting key players, but he'll put enough firepower in tonight, so it should be fine. We also have We Are Spurs TV says, I just hope we don't play horseshoe ball and have problems cutting through the defense. I mean, that's where these games become monotonous, boring, and to be honest with you, frustrating and quite intolerable to watch. People know me in games like this. Every minute I just start going redder and angrier. It's a simple game. Just be brave on the football. If you lose the ball tonight, chances are we're going to turn it over and go back at them again anyway. So just be brave in possession. Try things. If we're playing horseshoe football, there's players out there that are scared to make a mistake. And that's where the problems come in. We Are Spurs TV. We have Delhi 20 says, guys, is Solanke back? Now, this one's a bit more difficult to sort of get my head around because ahead of the Brighton game at the weekend, he said that this game against he wasn't available for Brighton, and this game against Doncaster would come too soon. But in the pre-match press conference, he never actually ruled him out. He just sort of said that him and Takai were back on the training field, but he never sort of confirmed whether they were available for tonight or not. So we'll hold fire on that one. It's a bit more difficult to work out, but if I'm going on what he said ahead of the Brighton game, it means he's not available for tonight. That's how locked in I am with Frank at the minute. So no one can accuse me of being a hater. I'm on his every word. Green Badge says, like that Scarlett playing up top, so Tell can play left wing. Look, we're going to have a discussion about Matisse Tell. I know a lot of people sort of prefer him to play left wing. I know in the pre-match press conference they asked him, about sort of playing left wing. And I know Frank sort of said he can play there, but I don't think Frank sees him as a left winger. I think Frank will probably play him through the middle tonight. I'll be surprised if he doesn't. At the end of the day, he wasn't brought into this club to be a winger. He's brought into this club to be a striker and come in and relieve Richarlison and Solanke when they had injuries and stuff like that. It's just his shit. So now all of a sudden we're asking him to play every other position known to man, like we done with every other player that's shit in years gone by. I'm absolutely fed up with it. The guy's had about 30 to 40 games at Tottenham Hotspur over the last, year, or end of last season, the start of this season and stuff. Maybe not 30. That's maybe exaggerating. But he's had a good handful of games at Tottenham. He's been shit. He hasn't done anything of note. He hasn't sort of lived up to the wonder kid that's everybody's given him. And there's only so many times he's going to keep getting opportunities and minutes. And if he doesn't take them, he'll very well find himself out on loan. Now, I know Thomas Frank used the excuse of, not having enough homegrown players for Matisse Tell, and that's why he had to be left out Champions League squad. That's just to make Matisse Tell feel good. But the reality is, why was he the one left out and not someone else sacrificed? Which means Frank is not seeing enough from Matisse Tell, when he looks at that Champions League squad, then thinking that, he's going to make a difference. So Matisse Tell is a long way back under someone like Thomas Frank. But it'd be interesting to see if Dane Scarlett does get minutes. I was saying this, I think, the other night on the fan show. Anytime he played last season, he either scored or assisted. He had an impact on the game. So it'd be interesting to see if Frank gives him an opportunity. We also have Delhi20 says, guys, what about Kulu still injured? Now, interestingly, Thomas Frank said he will be back before the end of the year. He's not going to rush him back, but he will be back soon. And he did say he is a key part of his plan. So I find that very, very interesting. So all you Kulu haters out there, sit back and enjoy his return. Stevie Fraser says, afternoon. Saws I'm late. Big up, Stevie. We'll forgive you. Probably up late last night playing FIFA. Future Music says, big up, lads. Should be easy. Let's have it. Come on, you Spurs. Big up, Future Music. We also have Paul. He says, big up, lads. Let's be professional and get this done tonight. Come on, you Spurs. C4 says, if BJ doesn't play 9 tonight, then I'm sure he's not part of Frank's plans. Needs to pull his head out. I don't know why fans keep expecting this guy to play up front. No manager in the Premier League is ever going to look at Johnson and say he's going to be the guy to lead my front line, ever. Which means then at this level, he's going to have to carve a career out as a winger. He's just not good enough. He's just not good enough. But he's another one. Instead of, let's play him here, there, and everywhere. He's had a good run. If he's not doing the job, sell him on. Ange Postecoglou would love him back at Nottingham Forest. Terry Wright says, big up, gents. Come on, you Spurs. Good to see you. Scotty Hynam says, big up to all. Come on, you Spurs. San Antonio Hotspurs in the house. Good to see you, buddy. Eugene says, playing at home makes a big difference. Absolutely spot on. He says, Soren Davis, spot on. Wouldn't be on Frank, but on the players. Mark New says, agree 100%, Dave. We've got to rotate tonight and keep the big names nearby just in case we need them in the final 15 minutes to get on and save the game. Super Spurs says, why are you screaming? Shush, the baby is asleep. Yeah, to be fair, probably should quieten it down a little bit, to be fair. Eugene says, if you don't play youngsters tonight, when do you? Absolutely spot on. Leighton Evelyn says, look at Chelsea, second team, much stronger than ours, and they struggled. Fair point. Stephen Fraser says, no excuses tonight. I worry about cohesion. Fair point. How many more comments have I got? 3 more. Leighton Evelyn says, we can't change the full 11. We are playing with fire if we do. Well, I have no problem with playing with fire, my man. These guys are on 30, 40, 50 bags a week. If they can't go out and perform against Doncaster, then they shouldn't be at this football club. But that is a very happy clappers comment of you, Leighton. You must be in a good mood of late. Very nice of you. Andy English says, hey, guys, just joined in. Are we rotating big tonight or what? Sounds like it after listening to just 1 minute. Where's the positivity gone? Oh, no, we're positive. I was just sort of saying, fans keep asking for rotation in bigger games than this, but now this game has come around, it seems like we're a little bit more hesitant to want the rotations. But I've tried to make the argument that this is the game we should be least fearful to make rotational changes. But I do understand the point of view that Soren was making, that it's come back to bite us and we don't want to play with that fire, to Leighton's point. And then P-Dubs, Rhode Island's finest. Big up, Dave and Jack. Good to see you in the building. But guys, we are going to keep cracking on. We're going to be on for just about another hour. Make sure you do get your likes in. Try and get your questions and comments in the comment section. We'll try and bring up as many as you can, like you've seen. And if feel free to be like Jason, throw in some talking points. Throw us off track to talk about something a little bit different. And we will have a good conversation around it. Guys, we'll have a quick conversation around Damola Ajayi. Spurs have allowed Damola Ajayi to play for Doncaster against us tonight. It's an amazing experience and opportunity for the kid. But are Spurs making a mistake allowing him to play against us? Because he will be highly motivated to sort of impress on Thomas Frank and his coaching team tonight. And if he scores, I mean, Spurs fans will obviously applaud him and stuff, but, you know, it'd be a bit of a concern. So how would you feel? How do you feel about allowing him to play tonight? Is it the right decision by the club in terms of, you know, for his development, or, you know, should they have just, you know, winners? No, he's not playing against us because there's a chance he might do something.
I think it's good that they're giving him the chance to play. I think that would send the wrong message to him by saying, like, listen, we don't value you or we don't rate you enough to be able to challenge for the first team, but we also rate you enough where we don't want you to score against us, you
Fair.
know, type of thing. Like, I think that would just be kind of cruel to do that to one of your young players. If anything, if he wants to score against, you know, his club, his parent club, you know, fair play to him. The guy has already scored some goals for Doncaster, at least when he first moved there. He actually was doing quite well for them. I think in recent games, for whatever reason, he's been kind of coming off the bench. But I think Damola Ajayi deserves it. I mean, he scored at the Spurs Stadium before. He was the one that scored one of the best goals, I think, of the season last year against Elfsborg, if that's right, the team from Sweden.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say deserves the opportunity to be able to play against us tonight. If Damola Ajayi plays us at the Park, to your point, Dave, that says more about us, you know, as a squad, you know, that he's somehow like just dictating the game and you know, scoring left and right. So I don't imagine that will happen, but I think it just sends the wrong message, actually, if you're not going to allow him to play against us, really.
Yeah, I think that's an absolute fair point.
Yeah. I think the thing you've got to look at that, if he don't play tonight, he might not play a cup game this season because they're getting knocked out tonight, aren't they? So it's, you know, let him have at least one game in the cup. But no, I think it's great from the club allowing him to play, because how many times have we seen it in the past where they're not allowed to play against the parent club? And look, so it's like you've said, you know, if we had enough confidence in him to be that good, then we wouldn't have let him go out on loan. But why hold the kid back? And look, if we do concede a goal tonight, then I'd rather it be from a Tottenham player than somebody else. So you know, we can class it as an own goal, can't we? If he scores,
you know everyone's going to have a field day with us. That'd just be Spursy all over again. The new Spurs.
Yeah, but look,
getting rid of it.
No, but I mean, you can twist it and say, well, we had to give one of our players to score a goal, didn't we? So you know, I mean, I just think it's one of those games where you think, look, give the lad some opportunity, because if we have got such high hopes for him, which it seems we have, and he's going to be part of our future, then these cup games against big teams, which we call ourselves a big team, is what's going to give him experience. So it doesn't matter whether it's against us or not. I mean, you know, it's a game where you just think, go out there and show us what you can do. I'm looking forward to seeing him play tonight.
So am I. And look, it's going to be a wonderful occasion for the kid. You know, another night under lights at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. It's going to be an amazing night for him and his family. To be honest with you, I wish him the best of luck, and I hope he's the only Doncaster player that plays well tonight. You know, everyone else, hopefully they play shit, but hopefully he's the only one that plays well. What an amazing opportunity for him. And also, what an opportunity to sort of in front of Frank and the coaching staff to show what he can do, or show that maybe on his return next year that they should have a little look at this kid. I mean, you know, the guy came off the bench against, was it Bodo Glimt, Jack? No? Was it Bodo Glimt?
Elfsborg, yeah.
Elfsborg, yeah, the Swedish team, the Christmas team, Elfsborg. You know, he came off the bench and he changed the course of that game. You know, he glassed up the scoreline, he came off the bench and had immediate impact. You know, and for me, I think, I question, you know, he probably had more of an impact last season than Matisse Tell did. And Matisse Tell is the big money player, and he's come through the academy. And it's another example of academy players not really getting the opportunity, even though they deserve it. You know, I think, you know, I hope the kid plays well tonight. I really do. I'm in his corner. Guys, let's move on. I'm going to kick this one off at Jack, because I know this is a conversation that really rattles his cage. So we're going to see where he is tonight on this. But Jack, Thomas Frank confirmed Antonin Kinski will start tonight in goals. It's a big opportunity for the youngster. Can he put real pressure on Vicario with a good performance tonight, especially since Vicario is a keeper that is prone to mistakes every once in a while? And he did make one on the weekend.
I sort of thought about this. I just don't think it's the right game to probably make those conclusions yet. You know, you would think probably more in like a Champions League game or something like that. If he's rolled out Kinski, that's where you can really judge it, because ideally you hope that Kinski can just pop up a lawn chair and just not have to do anything this game. If we were asking him to make 1 million saves for this game, that'd be really worrisome. Like, that would, maybe if he pulls off like amazing save after amazing save, we could be like, actually, fair play. Kinski maybe is putting pressure on Vicario. But ideally, he just doesn't have to do anything this game and can just sort of do what Manuel Neuer did recently, which is, I think Neuer like sat down, crisscross applesauce in the middle of the pitch at one point, was just sitting down having a lay round. I think that's what Kinski should be doing in this game. I don't want him to be busy at all, really. So maybe just not the right game, Dave, to judge him whether he is capable of displacing Vicario or not, because I just hope he has a very, very quiet evening.
First of all, just how rude of me. I've got to wish Lee Moody a happy 45th birthday. Happy birthday to you. Hopefully we get a win on your birthday. Jack, what do you make of this comment here from Lee? He says, if Kinski gets a run of games, he'll be better than Vicario, because I think people forget Kinski had a run of games.
Yeah, he did.
When he first arrived at the club. And to be honest with you, I found his shot stopping very underwhelming.
I think he's living off that Liverpool game, really. Like, that's just me personally. I think he played so well in that Liverpool game that people forgot about a lot of the games afterwards, where he was letting in some very, very savable shots.
Yeah.
Like, there was a lot of them that went right through his arms, right through his hands, that went into the back of the net. I think there were even some games where, yes, he looks good when he's hitting the ball. Like, he looks more technically skilled on the ball than Vicario, but there are plenty of times where he was just ballooning it into the stands, nearly got caught a few times, right, as well, where like player put a pressure on him, and then he kind of thought he had an extra second that he really didn't and got away with it. I think Kinski, there have been plenty of kind of sketchy performances from him where he has let in goals that he just shouldn't have, that people have forgotten about, which is fine, because last season, there's a long list of problems from last season. Like, Kinski was not the biggest one, but he did get a run of games. And I think there were a lot of performances where he let in some goals that he absolutely shouldn't have, that Vicario would have definitely have saved. It's kind of like with Dragusin, right? Where people were like, oh, Dragusin, he just needs a run of games. It's like, he did get a run of games and he was pretty terrible during those runs of games. I think it's something similar here with Kinski, where it seems like a lot of us maybe have just forgotten.
Like, look, I do agree with your assessment in general. Look, to Lee's point, I think there is things that Kinski probably is better at than Vicario, which is his distribution. I think he's got a much better passing range than Vicario. And I also think he commands his box better. He deals with crosses and set pieces better. However, unfortunately for Kinski, Vicario hasn't been exposed from a set piece in quite some time. It looks like that is an area we've improved on, in terms of Vicario as well at his feet. He's looked decent enough with the ball at his feet. And we're not asking him to play as many sort of balls out from the back. We're just sort of asking him to get back to the basics of goalkeeping, which is shot stopping. And that's an area where Kinski, for me, that's why he finds himself as number 2. He had a golden opportunity when he walked into this club to keep that number 1 spot. And he, to Jack's point, he let in a lot of soft goals. Shot stopping wasn't his, best attribute, So for me, I think that's, an area that if he is tested tonight, hopefully he spends large periods without, anything to do. But if he is tested tonight, it is a chance for him to show that he is a good shot stopper, because that is one area where Vicario absolutely excels. Now, I know he had that mistake on the weekend, but in general, it is an area where Vicario excels. And I think Kinski is going to sort of have to bide his time for a little while.
Yeah.
Ribsy, what's your thoughts on the conversation there around Kinski? And if you were Thomas Frank tonight, what would you be looking at? What would you be looking for from Kinski tonight to show that maybe he is ready to sort of challenge for that number 1 position?
Well, if you're not gonna play Kinski in this kind of game, then when are you? It's. I think that when he came in last season, I agree with it, everything you guys said. I think that he showed some talent, some ability, some signs that he could certainly improve if he got some more matches. I also saw some pretty horrible mistakes from him. So, look, it's one of those things where what you'd want to see out of him is a professional performance. You want to see him taking it very seriously. You want to see him taking it for the opportunity that it is, and recognizing that he is the number 2 goalkeeper in the team at the moment, and that these opportunities are going to be fairly rare for him. So I will say that I much prefer him over an elderly Forster. That's not even a question for me. So I'm glad to have a number 2 keeper in the squad that is functional, is useful. I think that I remember when Vicario was injured, when Kinski came in, that was expected to be quite a long-term injury, and Vicario really rushed himself back. And some of the chat was around the fact that he was a little bit worried about Kinski putting in some good performances. And I mean, that's all just rumors and chatter, but
Yeah, of
you know,
course.
it's not crazy. So I think Kinski showed some real some talent for the future there. And I think that I agree that with people who are saying that with some more game time, you could see a rapid improvement out of him. But that's the thing. It's so often we've been in this situation where we've got players like, I don't know, usually outfielders, usually not goalkeepers, but people keep saying, oh, keep playing him, and he's going to be great in the future. I mean, people are saying that about Harry Winks, for God's sake.
Yeah.
I mean, how many games did we have to play him before we finally decided that was a terrible idea to continue? But I'm not saying that Kinski's a Harry Winks. I think that's pretty rough. But the point being that you can't just continue to play a person based on potential talent alone. You gotta play the right player for the right situation. And I think that Doncaster Rovers is the perfect situation for a player like Kinski to get some minutes. Absolutely.
100%. And look, you know, goalkeeper is one of the most important positions on the pitch. You know, if you've got a poor goalkeeper, it doesn't matter how good of players you have in front of you. You've got a poor goalkeeper, it's going to cost you games, which, you know, cost you goals, which end up costing you points, trophies, etc., etc. You know, having a good goalkeeper is absolutely fundamental to having a good team. And look, I'm not knocking Kinski. You know, I think there's fantastic talent there. I think there's a lot to nurture. I think, you know, this guy has a solid future in the game. I look at the sort of build of him, you know, I hear, you know, when I've done a lot of research into him, you know, a lot of the coaches and all talk about his mindset and stuff like that. And, you know, with his distribution and all, I'm going to say, I think there's a lot of sort of Manuel Neuer in him to a large degree. Now, obviously, he's got a long way to go to ever live up to that. But, you know, he's got a lot of Manuel Neuer-like sort of qualities that do sort of need to be developed. But he's not ready yet. He's just not ready to be Tottenham's number one yet. And he is going to have to sit there, bide his time, you know, look to develop and stuff like that. And it's games like this where he can, you know, potentially grab more opportunities for himself in the future. That is, if there is a league game where maybe we should be winning it, that he might end up just getting thrown in there, you know, and getting more minutes that way and stuff like that. But, you know, I think he's a very good number two option to have in general for games like this. You know, he will, in games like this, Doncaster, they're going to look to put every set piece in the box. They're going to look to cross the ball. You know, games like this, he will come out. He's clean with his hands. He's not afraid to command his area. We've seen that against that shit team we played in the Cup last year from outside Birmingham. You know, they just launched things into the box. He dealt with nearly everything that they had to throw at him in terms of early that day. You know, he's very good with his feet, but shot stopping is an area that he just sort of needs to work on and improve. But I have no doubt once he improves that, he is going to be a very solid number one. He just has to sit there and be patient right now, because don't get me wrong, there will become a point where Vicario will go through another sort of patchy area where he makes mistakes. And that's where Kinski needs to be ready. When he gets his opportunity, he will eventually. You know, that's where he needs to be ready and take it. But for me tonight, shot stopping is the most important. You know, if it's game, especially if it's game where we're dominating and maybe we're not taking our chances, which could be the case tonight, we don't create an awful lot in general. Last thing you want is him conceding something soft on the break. You know, he's going to have to show he's improved his shot stopping, and that we can rely on him if he ever wants to be given the opportunity, if Vicario goes through a rough patch again. I mean, Soren, you've been sitting, I was about to call you Drewski, but Soren, what's your thoughts on the whole conversation here around Kinski?
Oh, Dave, you had me until you compared him to Neuer. The only thing that's similar in that sense is they both wear football boots and a pair of gloves.
No, I'm not saying, you know, he's
I know. I'm
saying there's a lot of things around him where he could develop to be someone like Neuer, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think the only thing that's similar around him is the goalposts. You know, Manuel Neuer is probably one of the best goalkeepers that's been around for a long, long time. But look, no, Kinski, look, I'm going to contradict myself totally within the same sentence here. I always worry about bringing a goalkeeper in as a rotation for an odd game. But I also think you need to bring a goalkeeper in as a rotation for an odd game to give him experience. But I just worry that, you know, you bring a goalie in, and I know they're training together and all this lot, but you bring a goalie in for the sake of it, just to rest another goalie, and it kind of upsets the whole back five. And That's the only worry I've got. For me, kind of like more the idea that, look, if Vicario gets injured, Kinski comes in for that reason rather than, because, I mean, look, let's face it, if any player should be able to play every single game of the season, it's a goalkeeper. And in that shout that you look at it and you think, with a back four, back five, or whatever we play, the most important position in that is knowing what your goalkeeper's going to do. And if you bring another goalkeeper in, you kind of don't know necessarily what he's going to do at what time. Whereas with Vicario, you kind of should know by now what he's going to do. And the argument against that is, if you don't play Kinski tonight, whenever will you play him? And I do get that, I kind of want both sides of the coin with this one. I want the cake and I want to eat it. But it always does worry me that I just think to bring a goalkeeper in a cup game, don't know. That is the one position that always worries me the most when you rotate. But I also see the logic in the rotation. And is Kinski good enough? Yeah, I think he is good enough to come in. We saw the first game that he played last season. He sort of did one or two mistakes. Oh no, season before was it? He made one or two mistakes, but then he did some really good things towards the latter end of the match, and he's shown that he can do it. And I think the problem when we have played him in the past, it hasn't necessarily been a stable four in front of him neither. So if we've got a solid four in front of him, same as we're seeing with Vicario now, where the defenders seem to be more of a unit and defending better with the team in front of him, we're seeing better things from Vicario. So I don't know. I mean, I would prefer not to have Kinski in tonight, but if you say that he's already kind of said that he's going to play, then that to me means we've got to play a strong defense in front of him. Because we
think you're on mute there, Dave.
Yeah, we can't leave him open.
No, we won't. I think we're going to see a strong backline. We've no option but to put out a strong backline with the injuries anyway. So there will be, a strong enough backline in front of them to be able to protect them. I do understand your concerns, but to be fair, Brandon Austin done all right when he stepped in. Goalkeepers at Tottenham stepping in are the least of my worries. It's more so usually the defenders or the midfielders that I worry about. But just a bit of team news, that is out early. Youngster Luca Williams-Barnett is in the match day squad today for Tottenham Hotspur. Be interested to see whether he's starting or on the bench, but he is in the squad, so hopefully he gets off the bench tonight for a couple of minutes. That would be absolutely brilliant for him. And also there has been a video put out by Tottenham, and maybe I'm just reading into it, but they did show, I think it's Mickey van de Ven and Lucas Bergvall sort of walking in with their boot bags. Is that maybe an indication that maybe they could be starting tonight? And also Tynan Thompson is with the first team squad tonight as well, just coming out there as well. So congratulations to them two youngsters, and hopefully things go well enough tonight that we can get them off the bench for a few minutes. I just want to take a couple more comments from the chat here, and then we are going to keep cracking on. Big up, Eltal. Good to see you, Jose. Hopefully you're keeping well. Everybody wish Lee Moody a happy 45th birthday. Hopefully you're keeping well, Lee, and hopefully you've had a great day and you're being spoiled by everyone. Big up, Stevie D. Long time no see. Hopefully you're keeping well, my man. Let's bloody go tonight, eh? Big up, DB, as well. Good to see you. Hopefully you're keeping well, my man. Off the lawnmower today. Hopefully in front of the telly watching the game. We've got Limpy down Unster. Kinski is weak in strength. He can stop the ball. He just can't hold the ball. We've got Lee says Kinski had the highest save shot percentage in Europe when we signed him. I think he did, actually. I think you're spot on. But when we signed him, that shot percentage, save percentage went right down with some of the errors he was making. Lee C4 says, Dave, sorry, what I meant is that BJ is a finisher unlike Tal, so I would rather have him at 9. Yeah, no, that's an absolute fair point. I think you make a fair argument there. C4. Just a harmless spud says, I'd give Kinski another chance. Vicario's not being without mistakes either. I'm still having nightmares from his performance versus United in the final. Yeah, that one right at the end was a bit of a boo-boo. He's got Van de Ven to sort of thank for him there. But I would argue he pulled off a good save against Garnacho, and stuff like that. I think people sort of easily overlook a lot of the good that Vicario does. Look, I'll be honest, the amount of times this guy was exposed, he's pulled off more one-on-one saves than I've seen of any Tottenham goalkeeper ever make at this football club. This year, I think it's going to be a little bit different. He's not going to face as much action, but he's going to have to stay switched on. This is the big test of Vicario, because it's one thing being in the game and up for the game and playing well when you're in the game, and you're being tested as regularly as he was. But when you do spend sort of periods of inactivity like he will be on the Franking games, will he stay switched on, on the odd breakaway and stuff like that? That's the big question of him this year, Harmless Potato. Good to see you. James Coffey says he's now a resident of New York City. Well, big up, my man. It's always a place I've wanted to go for Christmas. I'll get out there one year before I die. But big up, James Coffey. Enjoy New York. I know Nick Lazier is there, and Jack used to live there as well, my man. Big up, James. Eugene says Kinski isn't ready yet. Shot stopping, not on the right level. We've also got Canva and Goma in the house. Come on, you Spurs. Ugly Fish says, big up Irish Hotspur and all the Spurs. Smash the Doncaster. Big up Ugly Fish. Kate Rickson says, what time's the match on? It is on at 7:45 kickoff. And Darius says, big up Dave, Jack, Soren, and the other fellow. That other fellow is Ribsy and his young son, Oliver. He's on babysitting duties tonight. Coys. Big up Darius. Good to see you. As you can see, Ribsy is absolutely living the life there. And we've also got Kurt Smith in the house. Great to see you. RS Facere. Great to see you as well. Hopefully you're keeping well. We've also got Timmy Whitaker in the house. Big up, Timothy. Good to see you in the building. Neil Shafton is back with us. Great to see you, Neil. Hopefully you're keeping well, my man. Matthew Breaker's with us. And then there's another name I haven't seen in a while. Big up, Michael from Poland. Hopefully you're keeping well. Great to see you, buddy. Awesome. Noel in the house. There's so many people returning today. Great to see loads of people sort of returning in the chat. Good to see you all. Just maybe a quick discussion, guys. One of the two are going to have to play tonight between Romero and Van de Ven. If I'm sort of looking into the video that Tottenham put out, maybe Van de Ven is the one that would probably start alongside Danzo tonight. But who would you start, of the two? Because I did make the point earlier in the show, the fact that this Romero is motivated by silverware and his club captain. I would probably play off that tonight and start him over Mickey Van de Ven. And also, let's not forget, Mickey Van de Ven has a long history of, hamstring injuries that we do need to sort of protect. So he would be the one that I would sort of prefer to play tonight. Do you guys agree or do you disagree?
Yeah, I think for me, I'd drop Van de Ven, but then does Danso fit as well on the left? Maybe he's better to play on the right with Mickey. But yeah, I think logically most of us would agree to drop Van de Ven and wrap him in cotton wool, because I think he's more important to keep fit, because we kind of hope Romero will keep fitter. So yeah, to me, I would rather see a back two of Romero and Danzo, and hope I hope he sits on the left all right. But I mean, the other side is, what's to say we don't play a back three tonight? I doubt it, but what's to say we don't? Yeah.
I would like to think a back three under Thomas Frank at Tottenham will be more used for games like PSG, where if we will play 4-2-3-1, we're not good enough. But this is a way to sort of circumvent it by being defensively solid, but also sort of carrying a threat, on the counter and long throws. I would like to see, if we're playing a back five against Doncaster, I struggle to understand the tactical change.
But maybe the reason, to play a back five tonight would be to leave three at the back and push those wing backs right up.
Yeah.
And play a little bit more in the, the midfield. You've got an Archie Gray instead of a Polina. Let Xavi Simons come on and play up front, and kind of hope the back three with an Archie Gray sat in front of him is enough defensive to let everybody else go forward.
That was Ruben Amorim's plan against Grimsby Town.
Exactly, and look how that worked out. But I don't know. I just kind of think and watch with Thomas Frank. You just don't know what he's going to do, because we all said, the last game, the Champions League, we expected a back three and it was a back four. So what's to say that tonight it might not just be that, look, put three defenders on there and let everybody else push forward, and then. Look, if you've got a Van de Ven, a Danzo, and a Romero, what's to say the rest of the squad can't be rotated then?
Yeah, but, many people, sort of blamed not rotating them on Ange Postecoglou last year and reason, for a lot of their injuries and stuff like that. So it's sort of like, and we're short at centre-back right now. I think it'd be madness to play all of your centre-backs tonight. I know it allows you to rotate further up the pitch, but, it's going to come back to bite you at the other end at some point. And Thomas Frank is all about defensive solidity. It's about, that's his whole foundation at Tottenham, is making sure we're defensively solid, which then also always gives us an opportunity to sort of go and win a game of football. So I think it'd be madness to put 90 minutes in a Van de Ven and a Romero's legs tonight. I think one should start and the other one should come off the bench. Sorry to disappoint you, Neil Shafton, and be the bearer of bad news here, but Benjamin Davies is injured, so he is not available for tonight. Thomas Frank has ruled him out, so unfortunately we won't be seeing Ben tonight, my man, on that one. But big up, Neil. Good to see you, buddy. Hopefully you're keeping well. J-Dog also says, have a good evening, guys. Thanks for entertaining us. 3-0 Spurs. Really appreciate that, J-Dog. Good to see you. Let's go on to Archie Gray. I know he's a hot topic. Oh, sorry, go on.
Just to quickly say to Lee and that in the comment, I'm not saying to do that. I'm just saying it could be an option. Please listen to what I say.
What's he saying? What's the comment?
It makes no sense. I think he thinks that I'm trying to push for a back three, but I'm just saying,
no.
that.
Yeah. I think you're saying, you wouldn't be surprised. And look, reality is Frank has it in his locker. He done it against PSG, to be fair. On that. Yeah, Eugene, he had one job. Honestly, the guy got a year extension. He's being paid 85k a week, and he's been injured, for the majority of this season. I mean, you couldn't write it. And the whole argument about giving him the contract extension was for games like tonight, so that we could.
Thought he was Mr. Reliable.
Mr. Reliable. Yeah. Mr. Reliable could walk into the team, and we could rotate our two centre backs. But hey ho, it doesn't always go to plan, does it? Look, let's go to Archie Gray, guys. Let's talk about Archie Gray. It's a big night for Archie Gray. This is his chance to show that he can sort of anchor that midfield if something ever happened to Paulinho. What do we need to see from him tonight to believe that he can make the step up at Spurs? Because when we signed him, everyone was saying this kid's guaranteed. He's going to make up the step up at Spurs, no problem. And look, I will always back him in last season. It was incredible for the kid to, come in and play centre back better than the likes of Radu Dragsson, who's been playing there his whole career and stuff like that. Absolute, I commend the kid for that. But when I've seen him in midfield, I don't think he's really played great for Tottenham Hotspur. I don't think he's really sort of kicked on. I think he's a player that's come with a lot of hype, but we haven't really seen too many sort of great performances from Archie Gray or standout performances like we have from the likes of Bergvall and players like that. So what do we need to see from Archie Gray today to sort of believe that he is capable of making this step up?
Ribsy, any controversial opinions on Archie Gray?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, in the Brighton game, we had a real problem with passes not being completed. What I'd want to see out of the midfield, and it's probably not just Gray, anyone who's coming into the midfield today against opposition that's nowhere near as good as Brighton, is I'd want to see really tight passing. And I'd want to see, in his particular position, I'd want to see that he's been watching what's been going on and seeing how effective Paulinho has been in those recovery tackles and interceptions and muscling up. And if he's out there and he's making those similar sorts of plays, and he's got a tight, like if his completed passes are right up there in response to that poor midfield performance in the passing department in that first half against Brighton, then yeah, that's pretty much all I need to see. I mean, he's going to be playing against these League One players, but they're grown men. He's not going to be playing kids out there, so he's going to have to show that he can tangle with adults, and that's it really. Just completed passes and muscling up.
I'd agree with that. I think that's probably been the problem in both the Villarreal game and the Brighton game, was just so many sloppy giveaways and just unforced errors from the midfield. I've been controversial about Archie Gray, where I have seen some games where I feel like when he has been given an opportunity, he just felt exceptionally anonymous in the midfield. He wasn't winning the
Yeah.
ball back for us. And then he also, in my opinion, I think the sign of a good midfielder is in possession is if you're always open and available to receive the ball and to be able to do something with it. It felt like in certain games he was just being easily marked out of the game as the deepest lying midfielder, and that just worries me because you look at guys like, it's always a nice comparison because he's a world-class midfielder, but like you do think of someone like Luka Modric, like he just always seems to be open, like always is like drifting into these spaces to be able to pick the ball off of someone. And even I'd say, even though Bentancur has probably not had the best of games recently, I do rate that a Bentancur's game where he does always seem to be open. Like he always seems to be able to receive the ball and be able to move something with it. And in Archie Gray, there are times like Burnley, for example, that first half, I felt like he actually had some of the fewest touches of the midfielders, but he was the one that was playing the deepest among them. And I think in the Brighton game, he actually came on and he was on for only like a couple of minutes, really, but he did actually play pretty well. I thought he played better than Brendan Johnson did, who had about 20, 25 minutes. But Gray
Yeah.
came on and showed actually that he can play a pass in behind and can and link things together. But I agree with Ribsy. I think this game is really about, actually some really cohesive, competent sort of play from the midfield, but we're not just giving it back to Doncaster Rovers of all teams, just completely unnecessarily. Like Archie Gray should be able to get onto the ball, have a lot of time and space, and then be able to dictate play. This is one of those games where you don't really have a ton of excuses, I think, and it should be a relatively strong enough team that he will be able to pick out some decent enough players, to get moves going and start it from deep. So I think it's a really good game for him to show if he has been improving or if he's, maybe still a little bit raw because
One thing,
I criticized him heavily for that Burnley game, and I criticized him heavily during the preseason, where I thought in the preseason he wasn't really showing me that much to get excited by. And even when he was given opportunities towards the end under Ange Postecoglou in the midfield, I thought he was exceptionally underwhelming. But people think that I'm being very harsh because he's very young, which is also true, to be fair.
no, look, I think it's a fair point, but when I think you stack him up against Lucas Bergvall, but Lucas Bergvall had the bigger job to sort of get into that Tottenham team and make an impression. He came from the Swedish second division. You're talking about fitness levels. You're
Big
talking
jump.
about strength, speed of play. Archie Gray already had he was a seasoned campaigner, for Leeds at that point, when we signed him. So he's already up to speed in terms of, the English game, the strength and everything else. And I just think, what I've seen Lucas Bergvall sort of kick on. Yes, there's mistakes in his game, Lucas Bergvall, that he needs to iron out. But he's had much bigger impacts on games for Tottenham than someone like Archie Gray. Now, of course, you've got to go back to that. He played the majority of last season in the back line, which means he has less of an opportunity to sort of go and make that impact that Lucas Bergvall has maybe been the beneficiary of. I think that's a fair point and a fair argument to make for Archie Gray. However, when he has been given these opportunities in midfield, he just seems a little bit, he just seems like he lets the game sort of passes him by a little bit. Look, I have no doubt that the kid, can operate as an anchor, sort of get in there, stuck in, turn the ball over. I have no problem with that side of his game. But when I'm still waiting for him to sort of excel, and this is one thing that Leeds fans sort of praised him for, is how good he was supposed to be on the ball in terms of a passer, a ball carrier, stuff like that. I sort of yet to see that at Tottenham Hotspur from him. And I just wonder,
It's sideways sometimes. Sorry.
I just wonder, has his confidence taken a knock, though, in terms of, that he's not maybe taking that risk. He just seems to play it very safe when he's on the football pitch.
Yeah, exactly.
I worry for players like that because they might last for a few years, but eventually they get weeded out and they find themselves sold further on down the line. And I do think it does come a point where he gets the minutes. He's going to have to start showing a lot more in terms of on the ball, in possession, what he can do. That's where he's going to make the impact in this midfield because Paulini anchors that midfield, but Paulini can also play a little bit. He can make passes, through the lines. He can cross a ball, he can shoot a ball and stuff like that. And I do think with Archie Gray, he just sort of lets the game pass him by. I need to see more of him on the ball. And I think that's where Lucas Bergvall is streets ahead of him. We've seen with Bergvall, he can get stuck in and turn the ball over. But he's not afraid on the ball. He's brave on the ball. And I just think Archie Gray could learn a little bit from that.
Yeah.
I think you're all being a little bit harsh on him.
Are we only being harsh because of his age? Because at the end of the day, these are things he needs to improve to become a better player. Like we all want for him.
Name me another number 6 at 19 years old in the Premiership.
Bergvall's 19, 20 years of age.
He's not a number 6, really, is it? He's kind of a bit more creative, and when Bergvall's played, he's generally played in his. How good was Bergvall when he played left back for us? He didn't. He's never played left back. How good was he when he played centre back? He hasn't. He's always played in his own position, and he's always played with the players that were good around him. You know, when Archie Gray was playing in defence, he was playing with Davis. He was playing, you know, with a makeshift back five, never mind any of the other starting positions.
And I praised him a lot for that last year, actually.
Yeah, I know, but you know, I mean, and then you know, to compare him to Modric is it's almost like saying Kinski's and Manuel Neuer. You know, we're comparing these youngsters to players that are seasoned pros. I mean, if we said
I compared him
Palina,
to Bergvall. I didn't compare him to any season pro. I literally
no, but Jack did.
Bergvall.
Jack mentioned Mod, and I'm not having a go. But what I'm saying is, when we compare these players to kind of other players, we're always comparing them, and I do it. I'm not saying, you know, I'm not calling anybody out, but we compare them to players that have probably had 6, 7, 8, 9 years in the Premiership or in top leagues. Archie Gray has had basically one season in the Premiership. 99% of that time he played out of position. And we want to say, you know, oh, he hasn't done this. But if you watch what he actually does, where you're saying, you know, you want to see more passing from him, on the odd time he has done it, and I know he hasn't done it enough. You know, I agree with you on that. But when he has run with the ball, he's looked good. When he has crossed the ball, he's looked good. He has a very good cross. He has a very good, you know, long ball. He's good when he runs with the ball. The problem is we haven't seen him in a team where kind of it's almost a full strength team with him. And this is what's worrying me. You know, me and Leighton seem to be on the same thing today. It's a bit scary. But look, I just think with Archie Gray, he's another one of these players that we all look at him and think he cost us 40 million, so he has to be fantastic straight away. And that is the problem. You've got to take away that price tag from him. You've got to put him back to being 19. There isn't another starting number 6, proper number 6 in the Premiership. In most top leagues, there aren't many players at 19 years old that are a starting number 6. And it will take time for him. Now, I'm one that's always said, he will come good for Tottenham. He will be a big player for Tottenham Hotspur. Might not be this season, but he will play and he will get better and better. And, you know, that's the thing. We're talking of a player that was in a squad last season that had no confidence. The whole team was crap most of the season, but yet we want to, you know, we're picking out 1 or 2 players because, and it's always the young players that we're picking out.
I'm not picking them out, son. I'm not having a go at them. I'm not sitting here.
No, I'm not saying you, but I'm, you know, as a majority.
No. I know what you're saying. I just don't want people to get mixed up. I'm not picking them out, and I'm not, you know, judging him as a senior pro. I'm only judging him on what I've seen and where I think an area where he needs to improve, you know, in order to sort of start kicking on and developing. You know, we bought a player with real talent, no doubt about it, but I just feel at times he lets games sort of drift by at times. I'd need to see more of him in possession. And I think it's an area he needs to improve for himself in future if he wants to be given the opportunity, say, that Lucas Bergvall has been given and stuff like that. That's all I'm saying. Look, I'm a big advocate for giving youngsters their opportunity. You know, everyone knows that I'm constantly calling for some academy kids to be given their opportunities. I can't keep watching 40 million flops come in here and getting opportunity after opportunity, never taking it and not giving these guys enough. I'm a big advocate for it. But what I'm not going to sit here and do is blow smoke up their ass and pretend everything's rosy either. Sometimes these players need to know, you know, the conversation needs to happen around these players where they can kick on and develop. It's not pulling them out. It's not negative. It's a good conversation to have. It's there to help the kid. It's there to aid him. It's there to sort of, you know, what he needs to do to drag himself to the next level. You know, these are conversations he needs to have to get himself to that level. I would hope people in the club are having these conversations with Archie Gray, because if you sit there and pretend there's no scope for improvement and you keep going, he's 19, he's this, eventually, like we've done it with Harry Winks, eventually he's going to be 26 and people are still going to be talking about him like he's a young lad. You know, there is going to have to a period where he has to sort of kick on. You see, he's going to be 20 soon. All of a sudden, you're looking at it and going, well, there's a lot of 20-year-olds that play in the Premier League. How does he compare to them?
How old was Harry Kane when he actually started to kick on? He was about 21, wasn't he? 22? So another 2 or 3 years older than Archie Gray. Where was Polina when he was 19 or 18? Where was he? We weren't talking about him in the same veins as we talk about him now. These players take time. I mean, if you look through the Premier League and you say, right, let's start naming all the world-class or very high standard players at 17, 18, 19. There's not a massive amount of them. They're coming on. I mean, you could talk about Wayne Rooney and, people like that, but there aren't many of them. And this is the thing that we talk about Archie Gray. You can see it in him that he has got talent. I mean, it might never come out. I mean, we look at Ndombele. He had the, masses of talent, but he was a lazy twat. He didn't want the game. Whereas you look at Archie Gray and you think, this lad came to us and high hopes, big expectations, and then we go play him at centre-back. We go play him at left-back. We play him at every position. And the only time he plays number 6 is against bloody Liverpool when they're absolutely flying. And yeah, he got overrun. And all of a sudden, it kicked his confidence, and you sit there and we start slating the young lad off, and you just think
no one's slating him off.
I'm not saying you, but as a generality, last season there were a lot of people telling us that he was shit. He shouldn't be in the Premiership team. He was this. He was that. He was crap. He's not good enough to lace people's boots. It was being said last season, and I'm not talking about people on the panel here, but the argument is that sometimes these lads, they need that time to kick on. I mean, it might be 22, 23, 24 before he suddenly comes of age in a team. Now, you look at it and you think, we don't want to wait that long. And I get that argument, but the lad can play. He has shown that. He was one of the top talents coming out of Leeds, and that's why we bought him.
Yeah.
Thomas Frank wanted him. He's openly admitted he wanted him at his previous club. He's got him now. He'll take his time. The problem was we had a management and a coaching staff that couldn't coach this lad. They didn't know how to coach him to become a world-class player or a top elite player, whatever we want to call him. Hopefully we've got that now. And hopefully, rather than last season where he had to be chucked in all the positions he shouldn't have been playing, this season we'll be a little bit more slow with him. We'll be more careful. We'll build him up, and we'll get him to the level that he should be at. Now, had Thomas Frank had him last season, we'd be talking about a different player this season. I guarantee it. Next year, under Thomas Frank, Archie Gray will be a different player again.
I think, I agree with a lot of the points you make there, Soren. I think it's just the question might have, which I probably failed to do really, to put it in that tone. But I think the question was just what have you made of him thus far, right? And that was kind of just the way I looked at it. It was I have been kind of underwhelmed with a lot of his performances, but that's not saying that I'm just writing off the guy and saying that there's no talent there or that he needs to make it now at this point in time, as if there's some urgency about it. So I think you make a lot of fair points like that I would agree with, but I think part of the question was just around what have you made of him thus far? Crazy thing is, though, he's not playing. It looks like he's playing center back tonight.
Let's go through the lineup.
We have Kinski in goals. We have Pedro Porro and Spence at fullbacks, Danzo and what appears to be Archie Gray at fullbacks, because you have Palhinha and Bentancur in the midfield. What you would imagine would be Xavi playing through the middle, and then it's a front line of Johnson, Odebear, and Matisse Tell.
Who's on the bench?
Brandon Austin, Richarlison, Destiny Udogie, Barrickval, Van de Ven, Dane Scarlett, Teenan Thompson, Janai Byfield, and then Luca Williams Barnett. So 3 to 4-ish players that you would say, if we play well enough tonight, that could be given opportunities in the first team.
Well, I think when you look at the team selection, the way Thomas Frank is going about it, I think he is looking to get the job done
relatively strong.
Relatively early, as quick as he can. And then you're hoping that someone like Byfield will come on. He can go in at centre back beside Danzo, and that you can push Gray then into that midfield, which means you can take off a Paulinia or a Bentic. The idea is that hopefully we're seeing Thompson, Byfield, Williams, Barnett, and maybe Scarlett and Bergvall tonight, rather than Richarlison, Adogi, and Van de Ven. You know, that's the sort of idea around tonight for me. But he's gone strong. So, I mean, if we lose to Doncaster with this lineup, I mean, we've got big problems. And I think this is a good test of sort of squad depth tonight. It's a good test of the likes of Johnson, you know, especially if he's playing off that right-hand side. You know, he's playing. You know, we all know what Kudus brings, so Johnson will be highly exposed tonight if he has a sort of shit game. Big night for Matisse Tell, you know. He needs something tonight for his confidence to spark something for him to get himself going at Tottenham Hotspur. A massive night for Udebur, potentially getting another run out down left wing. You know, that's 2 games in a row to try and nail down that spot. You know, so it's a strong enough lineup. We better turn these over tonight. But let's get Soren's thoughts on the lineup. I mean, Soren, you surprised by how strong he's gone? Well, no, I don't think you are really, actually. This is what you sort of wanted, right? You happy with this?
I'm surprised in the sense of some of the players that are playing. I mean, I wasn't expecting to see Paulina. I didn't either, yeah. I mean, and I am kind of surprised we've rested both Romero and Van de Ven.
Yeah.
That I think that's the big surprise for me. The rest
Romero in the squad. Romero's at home making up to his mission tonight.
You know, I mean, that to me is kind of the more surprise. The rest of the team going forward, I'm surprised Gray's playing centre back. I kind of expected him to probably play that number 6. Johnson, I'm not surprised. Pedro, I think. Well, I prefer to see Spence on the left. I think he has been immense at the left, and I know a lot of people, and even he said his strongest position is the right. I think he's done better on the left, and I think he's been phenomenal on the left, and he suits that going down the left. But yeah, I'm not surprised. I think it's a good team. It's just the odd player that is playing, I'm surprised, and an odd player that isn't playing. You know, it's a mix of both, really. So yeah, I think there's no reason we shouldn't win, and let's see how we do.
Look, we should see goals tonight. This is a fun lineup for me tonight. You know, Xavi Simons in the number 10. Really excited to see, you know, him tonight. To that guy's point earlier on that he made, I think it was James Coffey about not having that sort of game, a guy in games like this. You know, I think James Coffey may well be proven right if we're sitting here 3-0 at halftime, smoking cigars with bucket hats on. You know, that maybe this is the key to sort of games like this. I was going to go down to Ribsy. Ribsy, is he sitting there or? Yeah, he's there. Ribsy, what's your thoughts on the lineup? My man, we won't hold you much longer. We're going to end up go and you know, feed the child. We don't want to starve.
No, it's all good, all good. I'm just trying to avoid having him making noise in the background if I can. But this is a strong team. It's one of those ones where those players like Odebear and Johnson and Tell, they really should be, and Xavi as well. Honestly, we should be scoring points. We should be score. You know, we should be making a decent performance here.
I think it's a real test of the forward line today. I think those are the ones I'm going to be most curious about. Who ends up having a good game in this sort of situation? Because Johnson, you know, he's going to be probably played on the wing. Can he bring? He's not going to bring the creativity that Kudus does, but if he scores in a game like this, you know, he continues that narrative of like, you know, he'll find a way to score. Maybe he won't do anything else but that. But if he does score in a game like this, you know, in a way, he's probably 2 degrees safe from some criticism. If he doesn't, then I really would, you know, have some question marks about how much Thomas Frank is going to really, you know, use the guy, because he hasn't used him that much, you know, since the first 2 games of the season. And then it is a big question between Matisse Tell and Odebear tonight, because he kind of grouped them together in his press conference. Thomas Frank, he kind of said that there are 2 players that he says have a real future and are extremely talented. And he did kind of say in his press conference that, you know, he sees that Matisse Tell can play as a striker, but he did mention that like maybe he is better off the left. So he's probably giving Matisse Tell one more opportunity, if not maybe one of his last opportunities, to really be considered down the middle as a striker.
I think Thomas Frank was more geared towards answering about him playing down the left-hand side in the pre-match press conference, because it was a specific question that was asked to him about, is his best position off the left? But I do know what you talk about. He did go on about him playing off the left, but then he did sort of say, well, he can still play up front, which makes me just think that he just sees him as a striker as is. Look, huge night for the kids.
He plays attacker for under 21s at France, doesn't he? That's why. So that's what he was kind of saying, that he plays centre forward for that. But yeah, I mean, I think that, when you look at it with Polina, the reason he's in there is because of playing Danzo and Gray at centre back. He's just putting that extra little bit of protection in there for him, which when you look at it, it's the sensible thing to do. I just think, I just thought tonight is the perfect, chance to give Polina another rest. But, maybe the fact now he's kind of played a few games, he's got some fitness that he sees that he can, he can carry on for a bit longer. But, I was going to say, he's, to me, is another one of these players that we need to wrap in cotton wool, because he is the big player in that defensive midfield for us.
No, he is. And, someone makes a comment there, they're surprised not even to see Papa Matasar in the match day squad. He didn't feature at the weekend. And where is he today? I think it's a fair comment to make. I think the plan is that Byfield comes in at centre-back at some stage. You move Gray into then Paulini's position. You whip Paulini off. But even the selection of Porro probably maybe alludes to me that we're going to look to go at them in the first half, and try and score goals, get Porro on the ball, get him to whip that ball in the box and get players on the end of it. So, look, it's a strong lineup. No excuses not to get the job done, but we are only a matter of time from kickoff. We're going to go and have a short break. We will be back here, in about half an hour's time, kicking off the watch along ahead of the big third round tie, the Carabao Cup tonight, which I'm absolutely excited for. I cannot wait. I do like cup days. They're a bit more relaxed, I feel like there's less pressure going into the games and stuff like that, but somehow in years gone by,
you say that,
come out with more stress and anger saying that. Exactly, Jack. Hopefully tonight though is one of them nights where it could just be routine. Go out there, get the job done early, get players on the pitch. And also, just a side note, Ajayi is starting for Doncaster Rovers tonight as well. So, huge night for the kid there as well. And then Ugly Fish says, Ribsy, the child needs to watch this. This is his life now, scraping a win against a team like Donny. Welcome to Spurs, kid. Big up, Ugly Fish. And big up, Derek Hutchins. He says, Kois. But, guys, we're only about an hour away from kickoff. We'll be back here in half an hour's time. I want to say a massive thank you to Ribsy, doing Daddy Daycare and Pundit this evening. Really appreciate you doubling up on that, Ribsy. Thank you very much for your time. It's great to have you back, my man. And big up to Soren as well. Really appreciate you giving up your time. I know you got a lot going on and stuff like that. So really appreciate you juggling that and jumping on here with us this evening. And also Jack's presence. We're always grateful for Jack's presence, I must say. I don't want to, preempt things, but Captain Pence says I do have trauma for Tamsworth. Yeah. Hopefully, that won't be the case tonight. Hopefully, it's going to be anything but routine. I also want to say a massive thank you to James Coffey for the support and going the extra mile, my man. Really do appreciate it. Guys, go and get the beers in the fridge. Go and have your dinner. See you back here in a half an hour. And as always, come on, you Spurs. In Thomas Frank, we trust.
Thomas Frank, we trust. Slim Frank.